I'm Sherry Spenzer. I am Vice President of Heritage Avon Lake, which is Avon Lake's Historical Society. Here tonight to share with you a book that was just released on September 16th, and it is called Lakeshore Cemetery. How many of you knew that Avon Lake had a little cemetery? You guys are amazing, because I have to tell you, I was at Jake's earlier today with the book, and we had I don't want to call them old time, long time Avon Lakers there, who looked at me and goes, "We have a cemetery?" And I said, "Yeah, if you just go a little bit west on Lake Road, you're going to find it. It's right between, well, it's next to the boat club. If you know where that is, it's just west of the boat club." So I have written this for Arcadia, which was a wonderful experience for me because Arcadia offers a format that fits a cemetery. The cemetery has a lot of stories in it, but as you can well imagine, some people have lengthier stories than others. And the way Arcadia works is you have to have a picture to support everything. You get to write your stories in the form of a caption, and there's a word count maximum, which is a nightmare when you've got a longer story. So what you've got to do is you've got to keep adding pictures until you've got enough pictures in there to be able to tell the person's whole story. The other side is some people just have very short stories, still interesting, but just not very long. Perfect size for a caption. You put a picture, a supporting caption, and now you've got a visual and the person's story to go along with it. So just to give you some background on how I got into this, I have been researching this for about 15 years. Not giving it 100% of my time all of the time. I was working for most of those years, but when I retired, I got serious about this and said, it's now or never, it's gotta happen. So how did I get started with it? I have a 26-year-old son. When he was 9 and in the 3rd grade, they did a unit on local history, and they were told to find an interesting place in Avon Lake and make a poster board, put some pictures or some drawings, and put 7 to 10 facts about your interesting place. Bring it back to school by Friday. So I said to him, you know what, let's not do the police station, the fire station, any of those, because everybody's going to do those. Why don't we come up with something different? And it was our next door neighbors who said, you know, there's this really old cemetery in Avon Lake, and it seems really interesting. So I proposed that to him, and because he was 9 and really didn't care, he went, okay.
He was dying to know.
Yeah, he was dying to know. So he and I went to the cemetery. I gave him a little camera. We walked around, and he took some pictures. I bought the poster board, and I said, okay, 7 to 10 facts. Let's go to the library. So we came here, and we tried to get some information about the cemetery, and we found absolutely nothing. So we kind of had to skate on that one. It's along the shore of Lake Erie, South Shore. The oldest standing legible headstone is from 1822, and we stretched it into the minimum of 7 facts. So he took his poster board in, turned it into his teacher. I don't know what he got on it. He was done. He moved on with his life. He lives on the other side of the world now, joined the Peace Corps, went to the Republic of Georgia, and never came home. I, however, continued doing his 3rd grade homework for 15 years. And guess what? I finally got it done, teacher. Here it is. I hope I get an A. So I've got some visuals up here because, you know, what's a presentation without some fun visuals? So here and here, you're going to see some of the sources and a few photos that I have used. Over here on the left, you're going to see some reprints of some very old newspaper articles. One of the insane things that I used to do was stay up until way too late in the night, sifting through very old newspapers. I got an online subscription. Type in Avon Lake, and you're going to be there for hours. But the rewarding part was, every now and then something would pop up that was relevant to somebody who was buried in the cemetery. And that's a motivator. And I would find one and say, okay, that was worth 3 hours. I'll do 3 more. Now you know why it took me 15 years. But if you take a look at some of these, you're going to get a preview, a sneak preview of what is in the book. There are a couple photos, no, one photo that you won't see in the book. It's this one right here in the center, the oval, because I could not find anybody who would claim ownership of that picture. I contacted a multitude of people saying, is this your picture and may I have permission to use it in a book? And they'd all respond with, it's not my picture, go ahead. Which isn't good enough if you're concerned about the legal niceties of all of this. And I was, because this is a publishing company. So I'm able to share it with you here today, so you get to see what Orlando Moore looks like. But you won't see Orlando Moore in the book, although you will read his story. Does the name sound familiar? It's spelled M-O-O-R-E. Moore Road, very good. All right. And he married a woman by the name of Eliza Jaycox. Does the name Jaycox sound at all familiar? All right, do you see where I'm going with this? One whole chapter in the book is devoted to, it's called Names on Graves and Names on Streets. And quite a few of the folks who are buried in Avon Lakes Cemetery bear the same last names as streets that you will see as you're driving around town. So let me, all right. The name of the cemetery is Lakeshore Cemetery. Don't ask me why, and I am not happy about that, because its original name was Avon Lake Cemetery. And I think it's terrible when people monkey with things, because all of the death certificates that I was able to secure for people who are buried there all say place of burial, Avon Lake Cemetery. And somewhere along the line, the name got changed to Lakeshore. Very frustrating. Oh, it's a dark and stormy night. All right, Henrietta Tyson. She was married to Jacob Tyson. Henrietta was originally a Moore. This is one of my favorite stories, and it's not in the book, and I'll tell you why. Because a lot of it is just kind of gossip. And I have this 3-source rule, and if I can find something and verify it in 3 different sources, I'm confident enough to include it as a story in a book. I found 3 different sources, none of which were particularly reliable for purposes of putting it into print. But once I've heard it 3 times, I thought, oh my goodness, that's a good story. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you anyway. Henrietta Tyson Moore was the daughter of a man named Henry Moore. Her mother was named Cornelia. She had a brother and a sister, and her father was a very, very wealthy man. He owned quite a bit of acreage in Avon Lake, 50-plus acres, including 3 acres along the lake shore. It was valuable property even then, by those standards. Henrietta's mother died, and Henry remarried to a woman who was 30-some years younger than himself. His wife was, in fact, 9 years younger than Henrietta. You think they had a friendly relationship? If you say, no, I don't think so, you get an A. And you can turn in your 3rd grade project. No, it was not a cordial relationship. Henrietta considered wife number 2, whose name was Ida, to be a gold digger, and thought that she was after nothing more than Henry's property. So she went to her father and entered into an agreement with him and said, all I want is 8.5 acres, and here's the deal. You sign over 8.5 acres to me, and I will agree to relinquish inheritance, any other inheritance, which was in the interests of Henry and wife number 2, Ida, because he went on to have 4 more children with her. And everyone anticipated that's where the inheritance was going to go, was to the 2nd set of children. So they signed the document, and then, no surprise to anyone, least of all to Henrietta, she files for a divorce. Wife number 2, Ida, files for a divorce from him. They go into court, and she says to him, tell you what, I'll reconcile with you, but you've got to sign an agreement that when you die, all of your property goes to our 4 children. And Henry agreed. So that stood for not terribly long. A couple years later, guess what happened? Want to guess? Yeah, Ida filed for a divorce again. And this time when she came in and the divorce was granted, she brought with her the signed agreement that the property would all go to their 4 children. Well, ultimately, one of those children died before all of this was settled out, but Henrietta filed a lawsuit against her father and stepmother. Ooh, she'd probably strike me down if she heard me call her that. And she lost. And she filed an appeal, and she lost that too. And she ended up in the Lorain County poorhouse. Did you know there was a Lorain County poorhouse? There was. Carlisle Township was later annexed to Elyria, so that it was technically in Elyria, but that was where destitute people would go if they had no family to live with. That's where Henrietta ended up. Meanwhile, there are 3 surviving children of Henry and Ida, so the property gets divided 3 ways. And one of those children, now an adult, was named Irma sometimes. And sometimes she was Ruth. And sometimes she was Ruth May. And sometimes she was Irma May. And she had 4 different husbands. So she had 4 different last names and would switch around first names and last names. So she was very difficult to keep track of. Well, she also had another problem. She was a gambling addict. And so she took on our then mayor of Avon Lake, Hugo Baus, in a card game. High stakes. Guess what they were? I don't know what year the card game was. Oh, we're talking 20s, 30s now. Yeah. So she takes on because he was mayor at the end of the 20s and into the early 30s. So it had to have been within that time period. Yeah. And she lost. And he didn't hesitate to go ahead and collect his winnings, so he now owns 1/3 of Henry Moore's sizable inheritance. And it goes to him. He's a real estate developer, very successful real estate developer. And he subdivided, sold pieces of property off, and did very well for himself. That wasn't the last time the 2 of them locked horns, though. She got hauled into court for disorderly conduct. Don't know the exact nature of her behavior, but her then husband also got brought into court, so we can all guess. It was mayor's court, and guess who was presiding? Hugo Baus. Do you think she got a light sentence? She got a fine, and he threw her in jail for disorderly conduct. You can't go to jail today for disorderly conduct, but that's what happened to her. So Henrietta Tyson shed no tears over that. But when she died, someone had her body brought back to Avon Lake and buried in the Avon Lake Cemetery under the headstone with her husband who predeceased her. And she now owns a very valuable piece of lakefront property in Avon Lake, 6 feet under